All right, let's, it's a little past 6. Let's go ahead and call the, August Board of Zoning Appeals meeting to order. Before we get started, anybody that wants to speak on any of the cases, be sure to go up to the mic. This is getting recorded. It's on YouTube. So, before we begin, I just wanted to let everybody know that so that everybody can hear what's happened. Can you give me a roll call of the members, please, Liz?
Sign in. There's some people that have noted they want to speak.
Okay, I'll deal with one thing at a time.
Sure.
Andy Bailey,
Here.
Grant Muller,
Here.
Stacy Pettigo's absent, Scott Hesmonsberger,
Here.
Chester Bankus.
Here.
And staff members Liz Titzel and Kat Bell are present, as well as Attorney Jay Moore.
I don't know what case, but just wanted to let Andy know.
All right, let's go through the minutes. Does anybody have any corrections for the minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Okay,
Second.
so Grant made the motion and Chester seconded to approve the minutes. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. We don't have any old business, so let's go straight into the public hearings. First one tonight is application CC-2024-00 782, docket number 22-24-SE. It's a petition of Hector and Tina Torres. They're asking for a special exception. Can one of the staff members please take us through the staff report, please?
Yeah, I can do that for you. And I think what Kat was trying to draw my attention to earlier is we've got 6 people in the audience that are signed up to speak. I don't have any indication of which cases, though, so just so you're generally aware. So in terms of the staff report, this is the application of Hector and Tina Torres at 828 North State Road 29. They're requesting a special exception for a Class 2 home occupation to operate a cosmetic-type business. Both this property and everything, actually, I think that zoning list is incorrect. This property is zoned R1, as is everything surrounding it. The petition site consists of a 2.253 acre lot on the west side of State Road 29 between 100 North and East Railroad Street in Michigan Township. The petitioners would like to operate a cosmetic type business from their home that offers services such as facial fillers, Botox injections, facials, waxing, and dermaplaning. Tina Torres, one of the petitioners and property owners, will be performing the facial filler and Botox injections and will serve as the on-site registered nurse. An
Aesthetic.
Thank you. Anesthesiologist who does not reside on the premises will perform the facials, waxing, and
That's an
That's
anesthetician.
Is that the same thing?
No, an anesthesiologist puts you
Don't put you
under.
to sleep.
This is a person that puts makeup and makes you look good.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So clarify that. They were trying to help, but they couldn't see the word. So just for a little bit of context, since we have more of an audience here tonight who may not be familiar with what a Class 2 home occupation is, we have both Class 2 and Class 1 home occupations. Basically, the idea is that a business can start out small within somebody's home, and then if it grows, it has limits in the ordinance on to how big it can get. So if it's successful and eventually it has to move to a commercial district, but it allows an occupant to sort of try something out and get started. Home occupation Class 1s do not require a hearing. Class 2s do, and there's sets of standards that dictate where the line is between those two. But generally speaking, Class 2s just are allowed slightly more, like they can be an accessory building, they don't have to be in the home, or they can have, I think, an extra employee than what so there's just some slight differences between them. Neither are very big, but they can only be approved at residences and only for someone who lives there. You can't have an own home occupation somewhere you don't live. So just so everyone in the audience, whether or not you're here for this case, has some framework for what we're talking about. So anyway, in terms of record analysis, and there is a photograph there on that second page of the property in question. There's a series of 6 findings under state law and our Unified Development Ordinance that need to be found positively in order to approve a special exception request. So the first one is that the proposed use conforms to the district provisions in which it will be located and the general regulations of the ordinance. So Class 2 home occupations, which are a special exception, they do have supplemental standards in UDO 516.02 that they must meet in order to be approved. So going through those, first of all, the home occupation shall be carried out by a resident of the premises with no more than 5 employees that come in to assist that person, and there may be no more than 1 home occupation per premises. So this standard appears to be met. Tina Torres does live here and will be performing some of the services and owning the business, and then there will be a non-resident coming in as a single employee who assists. This is, as far as we're aware, the only home occupation on the premises. 2, the exterior indication has to maintain a residential character as much as possible. So in this case, the business will be solely operated 100% inside the home. There should be no change to the exterior appearance or the character of the premises as residential. 3, the use of an accessory building, should one be used, or of the space in the dwelling unit, has to be incidental and subordinate to its use for residential purposes. That's judged by square footage, and that standard is met. 4, no more than 5 vehicles or pieces of equipment other than automobiles shall be operated from the site or stored there overnight. So this is usually, types of home occupations that have tractors or contractors' equipment. This allows for that kind of thing. But since this is a cosmetic business, it wouldn't appear that there'd be any issue with them having a bunch of equipment that would be going out to serve their business. They are going to be operated by appointment, so there won't be more than 1 customer present in the home at any given point in time. And they will only have 1 chair total for both of their operations to utilize. So they'll alternate days when their services are performed, and they have noted that if their business grows, they do plan to move it from the home to an approved commercial location. 5, any outdoor storage of materials, equipment, or goods produced shall be effectively screened from adjacent properties in the road. So this standard appears to be met. Cosmetic type businesses don't typically have outdoor storage of their equipment or advertising. In fact, much of what they would use would actually have to be kept indoors in order for it to be sanitary and useful. Next, any sales or displays of articles produced on or off premise shall be effectively screened from adjacent properties in the road. So if there are items for sale or displays planned for this type of business, it would appear that those things would be displayed indoors by nature of what they would be. So it appears to comply with that standard. Finally, the use may increase vehicular traffic flow by no more than 2 additional vehicles beyond what that residents would normally have present. So that's in addition to whatever the homeowner has.
So that would include the employee's car, right?
It says other than those provided for in section D above, but that's overnight. So yes, I would say it would appear to include the employee's car if the employee does not reside there. So
We may want to look at that when we revise.
that may be something to look at when we revise, because I don't think the intent is to stack. I mean, logic would tell you, not directly the point of the hearing, but logic would tell you that if you allow 5 employees and you're required to count their cars and you're only allowed 2, that the ordinance conflicts with itself.
Yeah.
So I would say pretty confidently the intent of the ordinance is not to
Yeah.
count employee cars, or you would further specify the employees have to be related and share a vehicle.
Yeah.
So, but in terms of what the verbiage says, it doesn't clearly specify. In this case, you have 1 employee, no more than 1 person at a time present in the chair, so either way, we don't seem to be out of line. No more than an average of 7 visits per week from a commercial vehicle for delivery of material or goods to or on the premises. So that would be like a semi-truck or something like that coming in to bring equipment. That standard appears to be met. There'll be 1 customer at a time, and there's not plans for large semi-trucks of commercial deliveries as a constant need here. Next, no use shall create noise, vibration, smoke, dust, electrical interference, smell, heat, glare, fire hazard, or other hazard or nuisance to a greater or more frequent extent beyond what you would normally expect from a residence. Since all work is conducted inside, the standard appears to be met. no more than one sign is allowed, and that sign has to meet the requirements of the signage ordinance, which limits it to a small, like 4 square foot sign, and it can't be lit for home occupations. This standard appears to be met. And then the permit for the home occupation is not transferable, and a new permit must be applied for whenever there's a change in the occupation, the ownership, or the tenants. So this finding appears to be met, but as always, staff recommends that the board remind the petitioner that they cannot take this approval with them, nor can they sell it to another person, nor can any future owner of the house utilize it. If there was any change or any of those things, they would have to come back to the board. And finally, the area occupied by the home occupation has to be of such a size as to meet all of these standards, and that standard appears to be met. The second finding is the proposed use shall not involve an element or cause a condition that may be dangerous, injurious, or noxious to other persons or property, and shall comply with the performance standards. So a cosmetic business operated indoors would not appear to create a dangerous, injurious, or noxious condition to people that are outside the property. We do note that because there's an employee and members of the public entering, the state of Indiana will need to approve a state design release or sign off that one is not required on this project before we can give it a local certificate of occupancy for customers to enter the dwelling. Nash with the health department did note that there is an approved septic on file for the dwelling, so there's not concerns from the health department on that. 3, the proposed use shall be site oriented and landscaped so the relationship of its buildings and grounds to adjacent buildings and properties do not impair health, safety, or comfort, nor adversely affect values. So the petition site is an attractive and well-maintained property. There will be only 1 4 square foot sign permitted for advertisement. The proposed use does not appear to adversely affect values of adjacent properties due to it being conducted entirely within the dwelling. There's not any exterior additions or modifications to this dwelling planned. 4, the proposed use shall produce a total environmental effect consistent with and not harmful to the environment of the neighborhood. So again, this will be in the home with customers at scheduled times. Because this is on State Road 29, there's significant traffic here. So one person coming or going periodically is not going to be a large traffic increase over what the school and other businesses north and south and people commuting through Clinton County are creating. The proposed use shall organize vehicular access and parking to minimize conflicting traffic movement on adjacent streets. So just because of the road infrastructure here, there's not a significant concern about backing up traffic onto adjacent streets. And there is adequate parking for 2 spaces on this site with a little more than 2 acres. There's plenty of room. Finally, the proposed use shall promote the objectives of the ordinance and be consistent with the comprehensive plan. So Economic Development Goal 1, Objective 4 of the 2012 Comprehensive Plan states that we wish to promote home-based businesses, to grow our own new businesses in Clinton County. And under that, action step 1 states to maintain good standards within the zoning ordinance regarding size, parking, screening, and other appropriate criteria that provide for a variety of home-based businesses. So as long as this proposal can meet the standards of the zoning ordinance, it would be consistent with this finding. Consequently, staff would recommend to approve the special exception with the conditions that, and this first one is standard, we always put on home occupations just in case, it's really not expected in this case, but there can be no accumulation of junk or debris from the business on the exterior grounds. And then 2, with anything with the public coming in, we always make sure it's very transparent that in addition to any approval here, they've got to meet all building codes and requirements of the state, including a design release. And then, of course, the reminder that any approval granted is not transferable to other individuals or locations.
Thanks, Liz. As the petitioner here, I'd like to speak on their behalf.
I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay. I don't have any right now.
I don't either.
Does anybody else in the audience want to speak on this case, please?
I have one. Is there a business operating currently out of that residence?
No.
Okay.
And I don't have anything.
I don't either.
It's in a good location to go in and out, and
It's not gonna add too much more traffic with
No.
that road already busy with the school. Do your thing.
It does seem to be pretty straightforward, and seems like a good way to get business as well as to use, grow business as well as to use what we have. So I'd like to make a motion to approve application number CC 2024-00782 docket 22-24-SE, according to the findings of the staff report, which were incorporated in the motion by reference.
Are you also wishing to incorporate the conditions by reference, or are you doing something else with those?
Oh, yes, with the conditions that are also listed on there, that were, yep. With the conditions that there will be no accumulation of junk and debris on the exterior grounds, that they must meet all building codes and requirements of the state, including the design release if required by the state.
I'll second.
So Chester moved, Grant seconded. Roll call vote when you're ready, Liz.
Andy Bailey?
Yes.
Grant Muller?
Yes.
Scott Hetzensberger?
Yes.
Chester Benkus?
Yes.
All right, that's 4-0, passes. So you guys' next step is going to be to work with Kat and probably contact the state if you haven't already to find out what, if any, approvals you need there before we can grant it a certificate of occupancy locally.
Okay, in terms of state from the medical standpoint, or?
No, so state law says that any building that an employee or a member of the public enter have to meet certain standards for safety. So it's actually the Department of Homeland Security that reviews that, and even if you're not planning to make any changes, they're still going to look at it as a change of use, and your building type now is a residential, which isn't actually regulated typically at that level because they're not worried about somebody who's a member of the public coming in and out. But
Okay.
since you have that, you'll have to check with them, and we just don't know based on your size and scope. You'll have to communicate with them. They may say, hey, here's some things you have to do, or they may say they're good,
Okay,
but
no problem.
they have that jurisdiction.
I can send you the contact information on that tomorrow
Perfect.
then.
Thank you.
And you don't need to feel like you have to hang around. In fact, that goes for everybody in the room. If whatever you're here for passes by, you're welcome to join us for entertainment value if you wish, but if you're
Thank you.
hungry or have better things to do, we're not offended if you slip out. And
It's like church. So let's go on to the next application. It's application number CC dash 2024 dash 00794, docket number 23 dash 24 dash VA, which is a petition of Chris Ragsdale. And he's requesting the approval of two variances. Can you take us through the staff report, please?
I can. So this is the application, as you said, of Chris Ragsdale at 405 North Perry Street inside the town of Kirkland. He's requesting two setback variances. The first one is to place a non-permanent or a temporary structure 1 foot from the edge of West Washington Street's right-of-way. And the second one, similarly but different size, is to place a different non-permanent or temporary structure 1 foot from the edge of North Perry Street's right-of-way. This particular property is zoned R3, which is medium-density residential. It has medium-density residential surrounding it to the east, the south, and the west. But to the north, there is both some light industrial and some agribusiness. And there's a zoning map there on the first page, so you can see that. Just again, whenever we have a lot of people attending, I try to give some clarification so you're not totally lost. But a variance in really simple layman's terms is permission to disobey the rules. So if somebody's asking for an exception from the normal written rules to do something alternative to that, and they've got reasons why they need that. So this particular site is in Kirkland, and there's the area they're looking at is a vacant portion of the parcel. It's at the southeast corner of North Perry and West Washington. The far rear part of the parcel kind of appears to have a structure on it, but that was actually split off separately. It's owned by someone other than petitioner and not available to them for use. The petitioner owns the petition site and then the residential lot next door where his house is located. The petitioner utilizes this site for gardening, and he would like to expand the area of the garden because his wife has several severe food allergies, and they're forced to grow fresh foods to accommodate her. The petitioner would like to place a shed to store gardening equipment near the Washington Street right-of-way, and then a personal greenhouse to allow for year-round food production for their personal use along the Perry Street right-of-way as part of an expansion to the garden. The Kirkland Town Council met on Monday, June 10th of 2024 in regular session, and Mr. Ragsdale did present his request to them and requested a recommendation. The town council did give a favorable recommendation to the BZA for this request, but they did ask for that 1 foot from the edge of the two right-of-ways. They also specifically requested that the structures be portable, so that this isn't something for a permanent structure if things change over time that's near their right-of-way. We do have a letter of recommendation on file from the town. On the second page, you can see there's a picture that just kind of lays out those things that I described. And Kat's got a picture from North Perry Street that looks across that area as well. So, according to the Unified Development Ordinance, there's 3 findings that the board needs to find positively in order to grant a variance, and if you can't find them positively, then you must deny the variance. So first, the approval will not be injurious to public health, safety, morals, or general welfare of the community. So given that, like many of our towns, the right-of-ways from the center of the street inward measures about 28 foot, so there's actually a significant amount of grass between the pavement and these structures, there does not appear to be any injurious condition created. The buildings are both far enough back that the required clear sight area is still provided. There's no obstruction of traffic views anticipated. The petitioner was going to request a 0 lot line setback, but they did adjust it to the 1 foot off because the town of Kirkland was not willing to support a 0 lot line setback. Secondly, the use and value of the land adjacent to the property included in the variance will not be affected in a substantially adverse manner. So a storage building and a personal greenhouse don't appear to affect the adjacent area in a substantially adverse way. The petition site is a small parcel that's not buildable because of Kirkland's lot size requirement of at least 1,000 square foot or 8,000 square foot. So it's required to stay in common ownership with the house. And since the far rear has an accessory structure on it that's not part of it any longer, and given where the house sits, it seems like 2 non-permanent structures would mesh okay in this area. The town of Kirkland's favorable recommendation did limit the request to portable structures, and those do allow for easy removal or adjustment should the need arise due to road work, utility work, or visibility or sidewalk clearance issues that might come up in the future. 3, the strict application of the zoning ordinance will result in practical difficulties in the use of the property. So the petitioner states he needs these variances to expand the garden, because he needs to be able to grow more food for their family to accommodate his wife's food allergies. Well, staff is understanding to the food allergies of the petitioner's wife's experiences. The site plan that was provided kind of led us to struggle a little bit with the practical difficulty, and one is needed. Where we kind of landed as we considered that is the only thing we really saw that perhaps could be a practical difficulty, because a financial issue cannot be, is food allergies and the need to protect and buffer and produce food for themselves could be a practical difficulty itself that could weigh in on the logic. That's not something to the degree that they deal with it that most people do deal with. The space in the middle of the proposed structures is where garden beds and plantings are, and they don't really want those to be on the perimeter just because of traffic and other things going by. So they're trying to put the structures on the outside. This house does not have an actual backyard, so there isn't a possibility for the petitioner to move this whole garden space behind the house like you would see in a normal lot where the house is to the front and the backyard is large to the back. The town council also agreed that the space was very limited on the lots in terms of having room for protected food production needs, and so they did support the request with some limitations, such as that the structures be portable and that they do sit a foot back. So consequently, staff landed at recommending approval of the variances based on the favorable recommendation from the town of Kirkland, with the following conditions. First, that as requested by the town, it can only be for these 2 specific structures as proposed and cannot be transferred to other future structures without coming back to the board and the town. 2, the structures must be temporary structures. And 3, they must sit at least 1 foot from the town road right-of-way as requested by the town.
Thank you, Liz. Petitioner have anything to add to the staff report?
I can answer any questions you have.
What was your name again?
Chris Ragsdale.
Chris Rathstein.
I can answer any questions you guys have.
I don't really have too many. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. You need the room, and you got 2 structures you want to put on, so. Do you guys have anything?
No.
Well, I thought the town was wise in at least getting some extra setback simply because utilities are underneath there, and sometimes you might have to do things with it, or maybe even put some in.
Sure.
But it looks like a relatively easy one to approve. So,
Well,
does anybody has,
we need to open it up to the
Okay.
public too.
okay?
So,
Okay.
does anybody have anything else that they want to speak on this application? Okay, go right ahead.
All right,
Chester.
all
I
right,
think you
so,
got it.
yeah. So I'll make a motion to approve application number CC-2024-00794, docket 23-24-VA, according to the findings of the staff report, which were incorporated in the motion by reference with the conditions. As requested by the town council, there may be only these two structures as proposed. Variance cannot extend to cover other future structures. The structures must be temporary structures, and they must sit at least a foot from the town road right away as requested by the town.
I'll second.
So Chester moved and Grant seconded. Roll call vote when you're ready, Liz.
Andy Bailey,
Yes.
Grant Muller,
Yes.
Scott Hetzensberger,
Yes.
and Chester Bankus.
Yes.
For you. So you're approved.
Great, thank you
So-
guys very much for your time.
And then, I don't know, because Kat reviewed that, but,
All your structures are under 200 square feet, aren't they? I believe they were.
if they're under 200 square foot, you
Then
won't
you
need a
don't have a
permit, you'll just
permit.
have to meet your setbacks. If you end up over 200 square foot, then you need to come get a permit. So whatever that measurement comes out at, just let
I
us
thought
know.
that's what we discussed, and I thought you said it was under, so.
It's not a complicated process either way.
Thanks, guys. All right, before we dive into the next one, we've got a filing waiver deadline of 19 days for application CC 2024-00875, docket 2524-VA. For a motion to waive that.
So I'll make, go ahead. Go ahead.
I'll make a motion to waive the filing deadline.
I'll second it.
So Grant moved and Chester seconded. All those signify by saying aye in favor.
Aye.
Motion passes, so the filing waiver deadline's approved. So, as I said before, we're gonna go for application CC 2024-00875, docket number 25-24-VA. It's the petition of Paul and Amy Harshman. They're asking for a variance. Can you take us through the staff report, please, Liz?
I can. So this specific variance is asking for a setback variance, but unlike the last one that was from property lines, this one is between two structures on the same property. They're wanting to construct a rear porch, actually a modification on an existing porch, but it will expand the existing footprint so that it will sit 8 foot from the existing detached accessory structure instead of the required 10 foot. So this is inside the town of Mulberry. Both this property and everything around it are zoned medium density residential. There's an existing dwelling and an existing detached garage sitting on the property already. There's also an existing rear porch. The petitioners would like to replace that existing porch in a way that will expand it outside the existing footprint with a new wooden deck that would be attached to the dwelling and sit 8 foot from the existing detached garage instead of the required 10. The petitioner did present the proposed request and the project to the town of Mulberry's Town Council on August 7th of 2024 during their regular meeting, and the town council did give it a favorable recommendation in terms of granting the variance. On the second page, you can see some photographs that Kat took as she was preparing the staff report. One from the rear of the dwelling showing you kind of an approximate location, and then one that shows you what the view is from the street, and that you're not going to hardly be able to see the deck from the outside. So again, there's 3 findings that have to exist to grant a variance. First, the approval will not be injurious to public health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the community. So this does not appear to create any injurious condition. The proposed location is on the back of the house. It's not adjacent to a neighbor. It'll sit between the house and the garage. And the garage sits, the next door neighbor is to the north. So, it's a small variance of 2 feet. Access for fire response in the remaining 8 should still exist to a degree. 2, that the use and value of the area adjacent to the property included in the variance will not be affected in a substantially adverse manner. So again, this location is on the rear of the house. It'll be a new updated addition. Typically, those things would appear to increase property value, not create adverse effects. And 3, the strict application of the terms of the zoning ordinance will result in practical difficulties. So both the house and the detached garage already exist, and just as a point, 'cause sometimes we were into differences on this, neither one was recently constructed. They've been there for a very, very long time. It would be difficult to move either, so there would appear to be a practical difficulty. Consequently, staff recommends approving the variance request.
Thanks, Liz. Does the petitioner have anything to add to the request?
The only reason I'm wanting to go with the 8 feet is because the existing little stoop is 4 feet from the house, and I would bring it on around and tie it in. It's already been built 8 feet from the garage, so I'm just wanting to extend it out and make it more utilizable. That's all.
Cool. Does anybody else have anything to say on this case? Got any questions, board?
Pretty straightforward.
Pretty
Yeah,
straightforward to me.
I'm ready to go.
You lose any from
All right, I'd like to make a motion to approve application number CC-2024-00875, docket number 2524VA, according to the findings of the staff report, which were incorporated in the motion by reference.
I'll second.
Okay, Chester moved and Grant seconded. Roll call when you're ready, Liz.
All right, Andy Bailey,
Yes.
Grant Muller,
Yes.
Stacy Pettigo. Oh, sorry. Scott Hessensberger. That would have really startled me if she'd answered. Scott Hessensberger.
Yes.
And Chester Bankus.
Yes.
Sorry, autopilot there.
It's
been a long day.
Really misses. Good, you should be good to go.
You're approved, so you should be able to take care of getting.
I think your permit was actually done, this is the only thing, but I will double check on that first thing in the morning when I get in the office and give you a call as soon as I get that looked over, okay?
All right.
All right, thank you.
Thanks. If we only went on this page, we're done, aren't we? All right. The last application. Let's go through application number CC dash 2024-00851, docket number 24-24-VA. It's the petition for Tracy Byrne. They're asking for 3 variances. Can you take us through the staff report, please?
I can. I'm also, just to help you out, going to pass this clipboard down.
Sure.
I've concluded by a deductive process that everyone who wants to speak is on this case. So this way
Okay.
you can see the names if you want to organize that in
Sure.
a way. So, all right. So this application, as you stated, is Tracy Byrne. And this is actually a request for 3 separate variances, all for the same lot, in order to build a new house. So this property and everything surrounding it are all zoned agriculturally. The site consists of a .76 acre lot in the agricultural zoning district on the north side of 250 North. It previously had a single wide house trailer on it, but that was removed in 2021. Prior to the house trailer being removed, the lot was legal non-conforming due to its size. I believe it was about a half acre originally, and then it moved up to .76 of an acre. Ultimately, once everything was done shuffling. But once the trailer was removed, then we look at the lot as vacant land and we re-examine it. The lot size for the trailer, as I noted, was legal non-conforming in 1993, but then between 1993 and now, another 6.5 acres that are immediately adjacent ended up in common ownership with it, which made it a legal lot for purposes of lot size, but a legal actually an illegal lot for purposes of having two houses on it. So it was a weird switch. Subsequently, it was then redivided, making it conforming and legal again with respect to having one house per lot, but they did not retain a full acre. So even though they made it larger, they put themselves back below the acre, and left themselves sitting at 0.76 of an acre, making it an illegal lot with a trailer on it of less than an acre, even though it was larger than the original legal non-conforming lot. A point system was done on the lot, and it did score enough points to be approved for residential use in the A1 district, so it does not require a special exception, as we're all familiar with, for a house in the agricultural district in this case, but the lot does not meet all the standards, which is why it's here before you. It will also be required to go through a one-lot minor subdivision process because it was not freestanding as a single lot in its current form in 1993. So before the subdivision can be considered, since the Plan Commission cannot approve a subdivision that doesn't meet all the standards of the zoning ordinance, there's 3 variances that the petitioner needs approved by the board in order to proceed with attempting to build a house here. There's also a septic on the lot that the health department has approved for continued use, with a few repairs. They're needing to add a finger because the new house will be not a single wide. It'll be bigger than what was previously there, so the septic does have to be expanded a little bit in order to serve it. So in terms of the details of the request, I'm going to go through each variance, then I'll kind of walk through them in hopes of not making this too confusing. So the first variance is the lot size variance. So the existing lot, well more than its original half acre, still is short of 1 acre and was previously at 6.5. So it's short by roughly a quarter acre for what you would need to not have sewer. There's an existing septic that the health department has approved for continued use with some repairs that does meet the requirements for the new dwelling that's proposed, which will be a larger dwelling. Staff is not aware of another designated area on the lot that's set aside right now for future septic in case the existing one fails. So that's the only thing the staff thought on this. The board may want to have further discussion or place conditions on is whether or not there should be a set aside to avoid any chance of having to condemn a house in the future if this system were to fail. Since the lot lost its previously non-conforming status, this variance request is required in order to move forward with the minor subdivision process. The second variance request is to decrease the required setback from a confined feeding operation. So the petitioner is requesting to construct a new dwelling on the site. It'll sit about 80 foot from a fence line where cattle are run seasonally. And while they're not there 100% of the time, they are pinned and fed, and their numbers, based on what we can see, I can at least document that they've been up as high as 25 or 30 at varying points, in the last recent history. So houses are required to sit back 660 feet. So there's actually a number of legal non-conforming houses here that if they had fire or damage would have to come for this same process before they could rebuild. But in this particular case, since the previous house was torn down and we're needing a new one, they do need this because of the livestock. I will note that since the confined feeding operation exists ahead of the dwelling, it can expand without needing variances as long as it's not, moving closer. And there are other dwellings that are also close to it. And as far as we're aware, there's no complaints that we've received from homeowners in that area or from the cattle operator about each other. So it seems like these things have just kind of coexisted for a long period of time. The third variance is to decrease the front setback from an existing access easement. So the petitioner is requesting to construct a new dwelling, and there's an existing access to a dwelling that's back behind this lot. And they would like to place that new dwelling 35 foot from the edge of that access instead of the required 50. The Unified Development Ordinance states that lots that abut a driveway, private road, or other easement of access that serves as the primary means of access for one or more lots have to also meet the front yard setback along those easements as well as the road. So there's an existing accessory structure there that's legal non-conforming that does sit closer to the access than the dwelling will be placed. The house that was previously there, the trailer, was actually there first, and then this driveway was added where it sits now, creating the situation where the the dwelling and the house are too close to others, or to each other. The drive was likely added in the mid-1990s when the house to the rear was built, and was not placed adequately far away to meet the setback from the existing house, thus creating the problem. Ironically, Norman Byrne built the house behind. The permit was 280/93 and installed the drive in this location when someone else owned the trailer, roughly 20 years ago. And then later, when the Byrnes owned both properties and then sold land off, this all just kind of continued to sit there. They probably did not foresee the end result, but the need of 2 of these 3 variance requests was created, by actions previously by the petitioner, not realizing what they'd need 20 years later. Driveways did not in that era require permits, so I guess I do want to point out there wasn't something where they probably didn't even know that the drive was too close to the house. It probably wasn't even a topic that came up back in the mid-90s, given what I know of that era and permitting. So in order to approve each request, the Board of Zoning Appeals has to look at those same 3 findings for variances we discussed on the last 2 cases. So I'm going to discuss each of them under each finding, and because there's the possibility that you could approve some of these and not others, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through each one and then give you a chance. It's up to you if you want me to go through them all sequentially and then discuss them, or if you want to go through each one and decide. I would note that the lot, just so you're aware of how they interrelate, the first variance for lot size, its approval or denial will directly affect whether or not the Plan Commission can consider a subdivision, and without a subdivision, the lot cannot be built on. The second one, I doubt they can get far enough back to be behind the neighboring house, but unless they can get in line with the house directly adjacent so they're no closer, that also would have an effect. The third one, however, they probably could change the size, shape, or orientation of the house to try to get further away. So it's not necessarily directly linked. But just making you aware of how those 3 variances play together as you consider them. So the first finding is that the approval will not be injurious to public health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the community. So variance 1 concerning the lot size, this site does have a septic on it, and a septic permit for repair was already issued June 21st of 2024. The health department does find that it is repairable and the soils are suitable to handle this and not create a health risk. There is the question of if there should be a set-aside area, since a permanent home is going to have a longer lifespan than a single-wide trailer. But the finding does appear to be met. Houses don't typically produce health risks other than in their sewage handling. The 1 acre standard has been a guideline kind of with the state for where there's septics involved. It doesn't exist if you can get a sewer off of a town. So that's the primary thing we look at. 2, in the use and value of the area adjacent to the property included will not be affected in a substantially adverse manner. So in terms of variance 1, there was previously a single-wide house trailer here. The proposal is to construct a larger 3-bedroom single-family dwelling. New homes around other homes do typically increase the value of areas. The area is primarily residential in use, to the point that on a future comp plan, we may actually examine whether or not this spot should remain zoned agriculturally. There's actually quite a few houses here. The finding for the request would seem to be met. And 3, the strict application of the terms of the zoning ordinance will result in practical difficulties in the use of the property. So these we kind of grouped together in how we wrote it, but for variance 1 with lot size, unless there's a neighbor willing to sell it on the land, which my understanding is that nobody's offered land for sale, there's no way to just magically wave a wand and have more land. So like many things that request lot size variances, the practical difficulty is the same as the request. You have what you have. So in terms of variance 1, staff would recommend to approve the request, but would suggest that the board may want to discuss whether there should be a condition requiring a future set-aside to be located and noted at the subdivision approval stage, or if they think that the proposed and permitted repairs from the health department will be sufficient to assure that this dwelling is adequately served for sewage disposal without creating a health risk. And then I'm just going to pause and wait on your guidance. I can go through 2 back to back, or I can.
I think, if you guys are okay with it, I think we should listen to all 3 of them.
They're very interconnected in
Yeah,
this
they're
case.
very, and then the other thing is then, I mean, if we sit here and we talk to, you know, just do the one, and then everybody goes up and speaks, and they might be speaking on stuff that's on other variances.
And so we
let's-
might have
So let's
three.
go through all three of them, so that people can talk on all three of
At
them if
once.
they have comments, and it'll speed us up. And if we need to break them apart, as far as a board, when we go to approve, we can do that too.
Perfect.
So let's just continue.
So with that in mind, again, moving back to the first finding, that the approval will not be injurious to public health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the community. So variance number 2 regarding the setback from the confined feeding. So there's been a dwelling here and there's been a confined feeding here for a very long time. There's also 6 other dwellings within the required 660-foot setback that would cause variances to need to be received for them or potentially for the confined feeding in different situations that already exist. So there's not any new situation created that would cause harm to the confined feeding operation by placing a home here. And the confined feeding can in fact make expansions, you know, going the other direction without even having to come for a variance, not just because of this, but the other homes. We've never received any complaint from the cattle operator about the homes causing them any issue. We also have never received any complaints from other homeowners or from a previous owner of this trailer that the cattle are causing harm to them in the way that they're managed or something else that wouldn't be covered by the farm laws, you know, that protect agriculture. So the finding would seem to be met. 2, the use and value of the area adjacent will not be affected in a substantially adverse manner. So again, the confined feeding is not going to be hindered if they need to expand in the other direction. Also, the comprehensive plan encourages that dwellings in the agricultural district where they're not a permitted use be grouped together to avoid taking farm ground out of production to the extent possible. So placing a home here again, instead of finding another new home site nearby that might put an additional restriction on this confinement facility or others in the area, would avoid negative effects on ag use and certainly doesn't create new ones given the other 6 homes nearby. And 3, in terms of the strict application of the terms of the zoning ordinance. So the location itself is already too close. There's nowhere on this lot that you can move back far enough. In fact, with the exception of maybe one of the other 6 homes, none of them have enough space to move back far enough to actually meet the required setback. So that in and of itself creates that practical difficulty. Moving all 6 homes and then this 7th one away from the confined feeding seems very impractical. And since the confined feeding is a permitted use in the districts it's in, and the petitioner is actually coming to the nuisance, they're wanting to build there, not the other way around, the finding would appear to be met, and I would say they're probably aware that there's cattle across the street. If they weren't, there certainly are now. So consequently, staff would recommend to approve that variance request because the dwelling is not going to impede future expansion of the confined feeding operation, with the condition that this petitioner and all future property owners would forego any objections to the existing facility making expansions. So that would be unique to this house, that the other houses, because they haven't had to come through for a variance, don't necessarily need, but just making it clear that they are coming to the nuisance, not the other way around. And then finally, for the 3rd variance, finding 1 about the approval not being injurious to general health and welfare of the community. So the proposed new dwelling will actually be placed further away from the access than the existing accessory dwelling. The access does only serve 1 single-family dwelling. It doesn't seem like a likely location or place that we're going to see a large subdivision, and that's going to need to be expanded to a 50-foot wide road to incorporate more homes back there. At the time the access was placed, it was actually owned by the petitioner. Someone else owned this lot. The setbacks will be met from the road. There's no clearance issues caused with 250 for coming in and out of this driveway because of meeting the setback of 50 foot from the road right away. So the finding would appear to be met. Second, the use and value of the area adjacent to the property included in the variance will not be affected in a substantially adverse manner. So there is already an accessory building on the site that does sit closer than where the proposed house will be built. It would appear that adding a new dwelling further from the access than the accessory structure, even though it doesn't meet the required setback for a primary structure, would make the look of the current lot more aesthetically pleasing, and it would not create any additional issue on somebody being able to drive back to their home behind than what exists there now. And finally, the strict terms of the zoning ordinance will result in practical difficulties. This is very similar to number one. That driveway exists there. How it got there 20 years ago isn't really a terribly relevant point at the moment. Well, I suppose we could theoretically cite the neighbor for having an improperly placed driveway. That it's all been there for years. Nothing new is actually being created. Moving this lot over further from the driveway, or moving the driveway, which actually is the illegal thing in this case, further from that house site isn't something that makes practical sense. So consequently, staff would recommend to approve the variance. Now, as obviously there's people here that I presume wish to speak, as I always remind the board, if you choose to vote in line with the staff report, you can, of course, adopt that by reference. But if you choose, upon hearing things tonight that perhaps staff wasn't aware of, that you might find to be relevant to these findings, to change them or change your conclusions, then you need to make sure that you specify your new findings when you make your motion, so that we can note that and have it on the record to comply with state law in that matter.
Very well. Thank you for this. Does the petitioner have anything that they'd like to add?
I don't know if he hears her.
Is there anything you guys want to add to the staff report or state for the board to know?
All right, I've got a list here. If you guys want to come up one at a time and please state your name and talk about it. I mean. All right.
Aaron Russell here. My wife and I, Avery, live across from the lot that's in the application. And just prior to me beginning what I've got here, as far as concerns, when I talked to Kat, there was a lot identical or similar to this in Pickard that is in the same thing. There can't be anything built there. It's kind of the same. Am I right on that, Kat? As far as the lot in Pickard?
I know there are lots. I mean,
Yeah,
there are lots.
lots.
There's lots all over the county that are smaller than an acre. If they
I guess the one I'm
yeah.
referring to is the vacant lot that was also deemed a non-buildable lot.
Yeah, unless they were able to go, I mean, I don't know how big that lot is. I know there is we've had calls on a lot out in Pickard that has it's very substantially smaller than this lot. I
We
don't
also
know
have
if
one
that's
in Manson that's under a quarter acre that's not
So-
looking promising for a septic, even
Yeah,
if they
so
want to
the same
apply.
thing, I mean, in regards to this lot, he was able to provide septic approval.
Correct, yeah.
And if the other lots could do the same thing, then they could go through and get a lot
Right.
size.
The state actually changed the law recently. State law used to read, up until this last year, that that 1 acre requirement, it was integrated all the way up, and you had to talk to the health department also. The state changed the law last year to state that zoning ordinances that require an acre in order to have a septic are illegal and cannot be enforced. However, ours states that you need an acre if you do not have sewer, and those stand with the state still. But the reasoning that that's actually built on has been changed at the state level in the last year, and ordinances may start to shift to look at septic capacity. You know, I don't know. We have other reasons because of ag preservation and other things why we really kind of look at that acre size, but
Right.
but I'll note that that's from 77 on to last year. That was an echo of state law, and the state has now actually shifted that under pressure from homeowners to say that there shouldn't be a minimum size if a septic can go there. Our ordinance just happens to not be in violation with that new state law change, so we haven't made a change or discussed one, and I don't know if we will. There's other reasons why we guide our development the way that we do, but I don't know if that
Yeah.
helps flush that out.
Yeah, so I guess where I was going with that is, you know, there's a lot identical to the one, or just, you know, similar in Pickard that is also non-buildable, and it sits vacant right now. So I'll continue with my concerns. The first concern being the size of the lot. The lot size is a concern due to the lack of space on the parcel, the way the parcel is laid out. Even with the setbacks that are being asked for, I believe that it would put any residential structure right on top of the existing structure and the finger systems. The survey that was sent to us shows the buildable area on the parcel with the setbacks that are being asked for, and the current septic system runs right in the middle of that buildable area with the adjustment to the setbacks. And then if not on top of a finger system, then basically on top of the well is close to, if not in the buildable area. To the west of this lot is a home that sits 27 feet from where the west setback is. It'd be putting the structure right on top of an existing home that's already there. This, creates a public safety issue when you look at fire load in a rural area that's covered by volunteer service. On the east side of the lot is an easement for the house back off the road. The easement is the only easement for the property back there. And he does have utilities, in here soon in the future, there's going to be further expansion with fiber. So to get fiber back there, they may need that easement or more of that easement to get that utility to him. The septic issue again, with this, if the system were to ever fail, there's potential that it could leach out, it could back up, saturate the ground, it could back up, push water onto the neighbor, which the neighbor is his septic. They're both adjacent and very close to each other as far as the leach fields, could create his septic to then fail. I've put in septics before. I know a little bit about them, so I don't know everything about them, but I do know that that is a concern, and we've had to fix multiple septics like that back up. See where I'm at here. So the last thing about the septic is, again, the way the lot is laid out and the way that the setbacks are. Even if they are changed, the septic is right in the middle of that buildable lot. And then adding to the septic system, obviously you're going to add another finger, which is then taking up additional space in that buildable area. Water drainage and surface runoff. This area, there is a pond behind it. There's a lot of runoff from fields that go to this pond. Pond then drains into a waterway, and then most of the water, some of the water goes down the tile, but most of it, runs down the waterway. And it has been an issue in the past where the NRCS and things have looked at the waterway and whatnot. So again, on the surface runoff, as right now, the lot pretty well handles the water because it's a green space. But you go to building a house, you add the surface area, you add more, you take away the green space, so you create more surface runoff. The pond, I guess, behind this property, it's continuously causing issues for neighboring farmers. Even with the small rain event, the pond is pushed to its limit. The overflow for this pond is in terrible condition. The only reason that the water hasn't been an issue for the houses that are around it is because the dam and the overflow are in the condition that they are. 400 East is the road that is west of this pond and the location of these houses. That road washes out all the time. The overflow and the dam cannot handle the amount of runoff that comes through this area. Like I said, when it rains, it creates issues for the county highway, but this also creates an issue for the farmer and the tile because of all the water pushing through the tile, blowing the tiles up, and then the maintenance of the waterway. And then, when it comes to the livestock, Jack, they can all, and Jack can touch base on this, but it's, this has been in the family for a long time. The livestock that we've had in there houses everything from pigs, cattle, and horses, sometimes even some rodeo bulls. There have been multiple occurrences when there's a dog in there chasing the livestock. And then, if we're not home, because we live next to the livestock, if we're not home, well, who knows how long the animals are out chasing, the livestock, which creates an issue not only for the animals, but it also creates other issues that, luckily, when it comes to smell or anything like that, or the neighbors complaining about, the cattle over there, like Liz had pointed out, we don't have much of a problem, but adding more residents obviously can create that issue. I know that they're moving to it, but they may not think it will be an issue, but could be an issue later down the road, especially with hogs. And then, with livestock that, there's a number of things that could happen, creating, a number of issues, allowing someone to build a house close to livestock, just asking for, number of problems and maybe potential lawsuits. Something that definitely needs to be considered when someone's looking, to build closer to an area. So the last thing I got is, I believe that at the end of the day, when you look at the lot size, even with the setbacks, this lot is way too small to build on. The houses are already close enough together. The sound from all the neighbors travels. Like I said, there's always dogs in someone's yard or in the cattle. There are always other, there are other lots to build on in the county, lots that are not very far from the one that we're talking about, that don't have any concerns, that are a buildable lot. So, if they wanted to build here, again, like it was stated, they owned the ground beside the lot. It should have been sectioned off accordingly. That way, future development could have happened. Anyway, that's all I have. I just asked the board deny the approval.
Thanks, Aaron.
The only thing I'd note, just for clarification, is staff did check all setbacks, whether the board's decision and arbitrarily on tightness, that's a different thing. But the side setback in the A1 district is 15 foot. That'll be met. The rear setback is 25. That will be met. The front setback is 50. And to the road, that will be met. Setback is 10 between an accessory structure and a primary structure. That will be met. So the only direction a variance is needed is from their impervious surface will be met. So we did review the other items, we we knew there was gonna be a lot size variance, and these other two actually came out of our detailed review. So the only thing I would clarify as staff is, we are confident that, the required minimum setbacks for the zoning district are meetable. And the house next door does also meet them. It's not a legal non-conforming either. At 27 foot, it has its 15 required. So nothing's, unless something changes in the site plan, that we're not aware of between now and then, there are no other variances required for other setbacks. It's just the one.
Was that the 35? What was the
Yes.
one?
You have to be 50 foot from a driveway
Okay.
that goes to something else.
That you're wanting to change.
Or an easement, so, they wouldn't be as close as where the accessory structure sits, but they would be closer than the required 50. They do not have room to put their house wide way.
Correct.
Because they're fitting in between the septic and the road, so they can meet the front setback, but, if they turned to
Right.
be 50 from the other way, then they'd be requesting a variance from the road, and staff would actually prefer to see a variance from a driveway for one house rather than a variance from a road if we're gonna be too close to something. So, but anyway, I just wanted to note that I can state confidently that the site plan we've been provided with does meet the Unified Development Ordinance's required setbacks for the agricultural district, other than to that driveway.
Is there any
Yeah.
chance that we could see the site plan that was given?
Let me see if I have it.
So I have the survey here where I was talking about the buildable area within the lot. And then I also have a picture off of Beacon that can't see it very well in here, but you can see where the fingers are placed. And when you compare the two, you look at the buildable area within the setbacks that are being asked, or the one. There is no way to build this house and add on to the septic without the house being physically on top of the septic. And you're also pushing it to 27 feet away from the existing house.
I'm gonna bring you two things. I just did a little quick math for you, and you'll have to compare them, but here's your buildable envelope, which setbacks aren't subject to setbacks. They're allowed to be in setbacks. That's handled by the health department. But they've got 108 foot of width after you subtract the 35, assuming it's granted, and the 15. And so then the house is 96 foot wide. So there is adequate room for it to fit. The finger expansion of the septic permit is going to the north, so it's actually going back, and it does not have a setback required from zoning. It's often seen that septics go in zoning setbacks for structures. And then the house, goes forward, but it still has adequate room for the 50-foot setback. The house is 30 foot deep, and I'd have to do some math on buildable area here, but we've got 215 plus 55 is 270 if I did my math right. Subtract 50, subtract 15, so subtract 65.
You're at 205.
So they have 205 of space that way. And that septic sits real close to that lot line between the two tax parcels that they have. There in the middle. So, if you subtract another 55 foot off the 205, presuming they can't use that, so then you're going to get 150. They have 150 foot of depth for a 30 foot deep house to fit in.
35 foot.
35. Oh, is there a porch?
Well, because their garage is bigger than this.
Okay, it sticks out. So 35 foot needs to fit in 150 foot. So anyway, there's the two halves.
Can I bring this up?
Sure.
It's an aerial. I had heard Kat mention that the septic addition would be moving forward. So the current septic field is right here.
This might help too.
And adding to these fingers,
Here's the current septic, and there's where he's
There's
showing
the
you, the
trailer,
trailer
yep.
sits right there by the lot line, and the finger addition's going on the back side, right
Okay.
in
Which is
here.
that guy.
so
It'll be on that parcel. Well, it won't be a parcel after the subdivision, but
it doesn't show it in these, and these are all areas of concern that I contacted the health department with. But there's trees here, there was old buildings here, and there is buried debris. When you go back on Google Earth, go back in images, you can see all of that there on the images. So just wanted to make you guys aware of that. And it actually sits on, if not over, this property line. Because at one point they owned both parcels, and now they don't. So, that's why I say it could create an issue later down the road for that homeowner to the west, because their septic fields are very close together.
Here, I'll pass
You
this
guys,
down.
you guys can keep that.
Okay,
Thank you.
okay. Thanks, Aaron. Who wants to go next?
Hi, my name's Eric Keith, and I purchased, as seen, you're looking at a map there, track C, which is a 6+ acres behind to the north of this lot. I purchased it November of 2019, and I believe that it was December 2020. I know Tracy owned the property. Norm has always been a point of contact for me since I bought the place. He came to me and told me that there was a clerical error, pun, on the survey. At which time, he asked me to go up to More Title, which was in business at the time, and sign a piece of paper saying they could correct the clerical error. I think it was March or April. I showed up at home after work, and I saw new survey markers out in my yard. So I approached Norm and I asked him what it was about, and he gave me a couple answers. I didn't really believe him, so I approached More Title, and come to find out I signed a quitclaim deed, which was not presented at More Title at the time. It was a clerical error. Upon further investigation and trying to figure out what I had to do to get the original back to me, there, if you look on Beacon, you'll see that there's still a lot, small lot behind the second one there. I'm sorry, I'm kind of nervous about this, but long story short, I got Norm. I had to go to More Title. I had to go to the surveyor, and I found out that somebody somehow duped me. And I said, I'm going to have to get a lawyer, and I'm going to have to sue to get my property back. At which time I approached Norm, told him what I was going to do. And about a month later, Tracy signed a quitclaim deed and my property was returned to me. Since then, I have concerns about the septic and everything else. I contacted Nash, I think it is, at the health department. And in that conversation, he said that 2 fingers were approved to the north of this lot. And that's my property. And when I said, how much room do you need back there? He said, well, Mr. Burns came and we had a conversation. And Mr. Burns told me sometime around June 21st that he was in the process of acquiring an additional acre, or a quarter acre to the north of the lot. I didn't know about that either. He'd already tried to get it from me once. I got it back. I don't want a house in front of me. There was a mobile home there. I didn't have any problem with it, but they were renters, and there was constant traffic, a lot of noise. I lived back off the road quite a bit. Once they pulled that trailer out, I was really happy because it was gone. And I did approach Tracy And I did say, if you would ever consider selling that small piece of property, I would like to buy it, because otherwise I would end up landlocked, except for the easement that I have. So it's my request that you deny this. I don't want to see a house. I don't think it'll fit. It's not a subdivision. And I don't want to see a house there. And it's not personal. I lived off grid for 25 years in West Harrison, Indiana. And I moved up here to work and retire. And this has got me kind of upset, because now I'm sitting here thinking I'm going to have a house. I have to drive by it. It's going to be 30 feet away from me every time I come in and out. I don't want that. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Eric.
Michael Gerard. I am the owner of the house directly to the west of the property that we are in question of. Due to the setbacks that Aaron brought up and the 27 feet, I was just going to say 50 feet from my house, from the east end of my house to the west end of what they want to build. You're going to be 50 feet apart. Living out there, that puts it real close to where if a fire happens, it could jump across. So I contacted my homeowner's insurance. And they said a property put that close would raise my homeowner's insurance because it's too close. There are other questions that I've tried to get answers to, but I just get the runaround. So at this time, I would like to be denied, please.
Thanks, Michael.
Jack's going next.
Good.
My name is Jack Barrett. I'm the one that has the cattle. And my only concern is I just don't want this in the future to come back and devalue my property if I decide I want to sell that barn or whatever. The barn's been there for more than 75 years. I lived where Aaron lives now for 46 years and just moved away. The cattle barn, I call it a cattle barn. We have had confined hogs in there, but it has been mainly cattle recently. The barn itself is only 500 foot from the lot. So that's all my concern is. I just don't want to have that come back and then someone tell me that my operation has to shut down because of the smell or the flies or whatever. And that barn and then the house to the west was the only thing there until sometime probably around 1970. And then all the other houses came in. So, and we've always worked everything out with all the neighbors, and everything has been good. But that's my concern.
I would note just this, Liz, just for your awareness, separately from this hearing, regardless of whether they're approved or not, if you ever cease to keep livestock there and enough time passes, you will lose your legal nonconforming status, and then you would have to come through for a hearing to reestablish livestock there, not because of their house, but because there's other houses in the 660. So it sounds like all the houses, 77 is when the zoning setbacks, and zoning was established in Clinton County. So it sounds like kind of a lot of this developed just before there were rules. But I just want to make sure you know whether or not this house is able to be built. The existing houses that are there, as long as they exist, if you cease to exercise your right to have livestock, there will come a period, if it's left without livestock, where you lose that right. So I just say that so that I have livestock too, so I don't want you to make a choice and then be surprised by something someday down the road if you bring an animal back in and we get a complaint called in by a house. Time does end up mattering. So you're fine like once a year seasonal stuff, but if you were to start to go longer periods and not have them, you could lose that legal nonconforming right. So protect that if it's valuable to you, is all I'm saying.
Okay.
So.
Thank you.
Hello, Blaine Barrett. Kind of here on behalf of Butts Family Limited Partnership. I guess I've got questions more than anything. My question would be, first thing that I heard was it possibly being zoned residential. So what does that mean? I mean, if we get enough houses there and it becomes zoned residential, what does that mean?
So your two zoning districts that end up in play in rural areas of Clinton County are typically your A1 agricultural district and your R1 residential district. The primary differences, just in a nutshell, are first off, average density per home for the agriculture district is 1 house per 20 acres, which none of these homes, would meet to look at it. Whereas when you get into the rural residential district, that density starts to compact because the idea is, okay, these are houses in rural areas. This is no longer where we're protecting farm ground. We're one of the few counties that I know of anywhere nearby where confinement facilities and grain handling can still go in without requiring public hearings as long as you have adequate setbacks. We intend to keep it that way, as agriculture is a strong value of ours as a community. So your other most significant difference between the two are, if you're zoned agriculturally, houses are special exception uses. They are not permitted by right. They either have to get approved through the point system or through a BZA hearing. And then if they are less than 20 acres, they must go through the subdivision process so that we can place a restrictive covenant banning any owners of that property from complaining successfully or suing farmers for normal accepted agricultural activities. Won't protect a farmer that pours chemicals down someone's well, but if somebody wants to be like, hey, there was dust at midnight because someone was harvesting, well, too bad, so sad. The farmer can take that covenant and go, well, no, this house came into my land, not the other way around. Once you change to residential, houses are now a permitted use. They can rebuild by right. They're allowed to be there. Livestock and grain handling have to come before the board if they want to locate in a rural residential district. And confinement facilities start to become pretty difficult to be placed. So basically, both of those zoning districts are in non-sewered areas out in what you would drive through and just be like, oh, it's the country. But one prioritizes agriculture, and that's honestly what probably 95% of our land is zoned. The other prioritizes the interests of housing in rural areas. So if it's zoned agriculture, the expectation is houses work around working ag. When it changes to a R1 residential, then we start to go, ooh, this is an area that's developing into a neighborhood. It deserves some protection from intense agricultural activities locating within it. And so we have some little, I'm called islands. We don't just zone one lot. It's usually going to be like a group. But for any change like that to happen, you'd be looking at probably a comprehensive plan update and a major redos of the zoning ordinance, because unless a landowner requests a change, like if somebody were to want to build too many houses to be approved in the A1 district or something, we don't just go out and randomly zone one location by force. That's a comprehensive thing the county would look at across the board every 10 to 20 years. We do a review of what's happening and what's occurring in different areas and what the effects of this board's actions, have become in different places, and evaluate whether or not the zoning districts remain appropriate for what the 100 and 150-year plans say we want to head toward, in those areas. And then we zone in a way that encourages that to happen. So zoned agriculturally, the houses are the thing that's out of place. So if certain situations happen like this where a house is removed, they can't just rebuild. They have to come in and be considered. And the same would be true for every house in this area. If something were to happen, it would have to be looked at. Its history would have to be looked at, and it might not be able to be rebuilt by right if it didn't already find itself compliant with all the regulations. Whereas once you move to R1, then the houses are allowed as long as they meet the standards. So now we just look at setbacks, impervious surface, those kinds of things.
So examples of that would be that area of Hamilton Road and north of Jefferson, pretty residential areas right through there. Those are some example of R1 districts. In farming coexist. I mean, United has facilities just to the east of that, and the dump and all that that area right there is resident or R1 districts. you know, more than likely, that kind of stuff is gonna come from a comprehensive
It
plan
is, yeah.
type of a deal.
Unless everyone as neighbors went, we don't want agricultural activities here, we meet the density requirements for R1, we'd like to all come as a group and petition. But it's, you know, there would be announcements, and the law would require some kind of notice be given.
So-
That's a little
so-
scary, I'll be
so-
honest.
So an
It's a little scary.
example of what could happen is, you know, we had tornadoes in the Colfax area a year or so ago. All those houses had to go through a process since they were in A1. Most of them just got thrown together and.
A lot of them had more than 20
pre-approved,
acres,
yeah.
they were farm homes,
Yeah.
so it
So
wasn't.
It was a slam
but-
dunk, didn't even have to go towards approval.
Right.
But if you had a smaller area like that area north of Jefferson got wiped out, you've got a lot of stuff that you've got to work through. So it's a thing that helps expedite some of the stuff that happens on our boards at the end of the time when you approve something A1 versus
Versus
R1.
R1.
The concern for us is if we start to see a lot of houses, we really don't want to even have a request to throw 10,000 hogs in the middle of them or something like that.
Right,
Like there
right.
starts to need to be some separation. So starting to recognize the differences in the pattern of development helps protect everybody on all sides. You know, to be like, this is no longer just a single farmer's home, you know, or a home that was sold that used to be a farmer's home. Like this is actually becoming a group of houses and should be looked at as having appropriate setbacks because confined feedings and grain handling do have to set back from the edges of residential districts, not just from a house itself. So like this variance request is about a setback between a house and a facility because it's A1, so there's just a setback. But if it was zoned residentially, then it would go around the perimeters of the property and the setbacks would start there and affect intense ag. So it's just a difference in protection. Neither district is gonna have sewers and neither district is gonna be near enough to a town to be annexed. If you're in that situation, you would be an R2 or an R3 if there's sewers serving you or you're in the next band of annexation for a municipality.
Okay. Well, my other question, I guess, would be if this variance would be granted, then I think you've answered most of it as far as, you know, sounds like the confinement operation could add on basically away from, correct?
Yep.
So where does that stand? I saw the survey, but where does all of that stand as far as, will that be the closest house?
So, that house, the house next to it, and the house kind of around the corner are the three closest. Depending on exactly how you measure, because if the field is 100% vegetative, then the setback shifts closer to the barns, in which case it is not the closest house at all. But if cattle are eating, you know, in confinement areas, like they've got hay stacked or watering areas that are over closer, then that setback affects from those areas.
Okay.
So we use the fence as a perimeter because you always advertise the most restrictive, because something can be more than that. We didn't want to find out that the farmer had placed his hay bale in that corner this year and all of a sudden that setback shifts around. But grass that's purely pasture is over 75% vegetative and meets the stocking rates. There's limitations for how many cattle per acre, horses per acre, chickens per acre, you know, whatever. There's a calculation based on manure output that we use to assign fractions of an animal to different animals. A dairy cow is 1.5 animal units, beef cow is 1. A goat would be like a third of an animal unit, but it's Purdue helped develop it. And then, you know, there's limits to what you can put on that ground. It has to remain vegetative. And if that's the situation, then the areas that are vegetative don't have a direct setback. So it would only be one of the closest two houses if the cattle are being kept in confinement or intense feeding in that corner.
Okay.
If the barn is the only area, or I've seen in flyovers where it's kind of midway across the field, they've stacked hay, which makes sense. Like, I have livestock, you throw a round bale out, you know, you don't want to be trying to maneuver around stuff, so you just put it out in the middle of the field and have the mud be there. But, you know, that setback's going to go from the confinement areas where the feeding's occurring or where watering's occurring. So I guess the answer is not necessarily, depending on where the
Where it
animals are
is.
being held.
Right.
Previous flyovers where I saw it kind of ranged, my guess is because the livestock operator like me just kind of does what makes sense for him, you know, in a given year for what he's feeding and where.
Right.
But if his animals are closer to the barn, then this actually is neither of the houses, none of the three at this end would be the closest.
Okay, okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Blaine. I've got Heather Gerard on my list. Would you like to speak?
I think with everything that everybody has already brought up, this is definitely not personal. It is definitely for the safety of those living nearby, the people that may want to build there. You know, our house could easily catch on fire, and with that gap being so small, it could catch their house on fire and it could go up just as quickly as ours could. Especially being in an area where we are covered by a volunteer fire service. There are places that have burnt to the ground because they haven't been able to get there quick enough and people haven't been there depending on the time of day. I think it's the neighbors that we have right now, I think are great. I think that, you know, none of us are taking any of this personally. We just want to look out for the safety of what we have and who's there right now. And I just would like to see this be denied.
Thanks, Heather. So petitioner or anybody else have anything to add? Well,
Bert, were you wanting to speak?
yeah, go ahead, Bert.
You'll get a chance. It'll come back to you, Norman.
My name is Bert Weaver, Commissioner for Clinton County. And first of all, thank you, gentlemen, for spending time and, you know, flipping the coin and listening to all of the good things and the bad things. This is tough because obviously as a commissioner, I'd like to see more growth in our community every day. So to one extreme, I would like to see us grow and have new buildings and have new taxes and so forth. But at the same time, I received 3 phone calls. So, you know, I'm not sure. I had 3 neighbors call me specifically. One of them is Mike here and his wife that were concerned, and so I did speak with them, but I've had 2 other neighbors also call me with major concerns. And they were asking me to come and make this little notation this evening, and I told them that I would. And like I said, it's tough because we want to see new growth and so forth, but I'm also concerned in our community where we try to push a pencil through a big hole trying to kind of fill it when sometimes it doesn't fit. And in this particular case, there are several exceptions that I think we're trying to squeeze in. And in this particular case, not only are you talking about a property that's going to become non-conforming, 2 or 3 or 4 years from now, something happens to the owners of this property and they decide to try to sell it. Myself coming from a lending institution and so forth, it becomes a nightmare because there are so many exceptions that a lender's not going to finance. So, you know, we're creating monsters on further down, and I sometimes wonder, and obviously we have to make exceptions. So, you know, the 1 acre was set in place as a guideline, you know, so you can go one side or the other and it makes no difference. But when you get down to where we're making such large exceptions for that, and we've got the possibility of a septic that's going to run underneath it and not maybe run underneath it as a lender, and then we do a septic inspection and we find out that it's on somebody else's property or it's under the house to a certain degree, it's a dead deal. So you can't get good financing. So the next thing that happens to that piece of property is it becomes a non-conforming loan, and somebody's going to pay higher interest rate for that particular deal so that they can get financing on that property. And usually when that happens, then it becomes a deterioration completely. And that's what happens to us a lot of times in Clinton County, in that we can't get good solid financing because the properties are non-conforming in many ways. So I think it's imperative not only that you look for the individual that we're doing stuff with, but I think we have to look down the road and figure out what we want to do in the future should that happen on further down. So it's a big hammer that you guys are playing with. And sometimes, I know that Norm and his wife would love to have the house there and stuff, but there are other areas that we could build the house, and it's not a non-conforming situation, and we're not trying to put something in there that doesn't fit, and everybody benefits from. So, based on the three people that I spoke with, my recommendation to those three people was that it should be denied. I think that we need to find another home for that to go to. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks, Bert.
Thank you. Anybody else?
A concern, I guess, when Liz had mentioned the livestock being there, and that time frame from which livestock isn't there, and then you have to go back into play of like, well, can we put livestock there? Well, we might have to go to the neighbors and ask for that to happen. We all know the markets, the livestock markets. We all know that they're up and down, and they play a huge role when it comes to raising livestock. And that, that gap there may be larger than the instance where we would have to go and ask for livestock to be put there again. So that is a concern to me, when we talk about that. So that's the last thing I got.
Thanks, Aaron. Anybody else like to speak? Would you guys? Okay.
I'd like to address one more thing if I could. What Aaron was talking about earlier as far as saturation of the ground on a septic.
So this is your Eric.
Eric, yes. In the rains, the way my property is, I have two basic small fields behind my house. One is a garden and there's a swale with a lot of drainage coming off from Josh Ritchie's property. When it rains real heavy, I can't get to that field on the east side because the swale fills up with water. Until it runs out the lake and down across 400, that's basically non-usable for me until that water goes down. And I've got pictures of it on my phone where the front field from my house out to 250 looks like a lake. So the drainage is a big concern about that too. That was all I want to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Eric.
I think we need to.
Okay. I think we're ready for board discussion. unless anybody
Andy,
has
I think Norman the applicant had wanted to, did you want to speak to the board regarding?
No,
Okay, all right, like you did, so I just wanted to make sure you weren't being missed, so.
I think we tried to do everything that we're supposed to do. Submitted everything we were supposed to. And sorry these people feel that way, but I think conforming to everything that was supposed to be done. I own that property.
Sorry, I don't want to interrupt you, but if
Yeah,
you want the board to because I will have to sum it up for the audio, if you wouldn't mind going to the microphone, because we're getting to where I don't know that I can sum it up. Okay, I'm not trying to cut you off at all, so for the record, Norman had just noted he didn't think he wanted to say a whole lot, but he felt that he was conforming and he was trying to make things work. I think, does that sum up what you guys heard as well? Just for whoever's listening online.
Talking about the total acreage, which I had owned since 1994, I'd seen a lot of floods, a lot of rainfall and stuff going to the west, and Eric was right. Sometimes you get 4, 5, 6 inches of rain. Where he lives to the east, there's a field that coming off, which Blaine Farms. He knows, it's always had problems over there and for drainage, and happens to go through Josh's farm there, and it seemed like this all started back a long time ago when some other people lived there, and I know this isn't relevant, but I'm just saying that, there's never been where this trailer was. That lot right there, it's never been underwater, and there's no water issues right there. And the septic that Mr. Nash come out and looked at, I know there was 2 trees back there, but I told him we'd take those trees down if we had to. And there's more than enough room to add 2 fingers and still have enough extra room back there. Blaine and Jack and I have been neighbors for 45 years, and basically that's all I got to say. So.
Thanks, Norman.
Thank you, welcome.
All right, well, let's go to some board discussion. I mean, positives on this lot, approving this, for me, is taking away some tillable ground somewhere else to build a house. And that's the biggest advantage to building the lot that I see, or building on this lot that I see. I mean, how many times do we sit as a board and take tillable ground away? So, I mean, if we feel like we can feasibly do this, that's the positive to me. I mean, obviously, it's gonna strain a little bit of drainage here. That's obvious because we're gonna have more impervious surface, but
I think there's too many negatives, in my opinion. The fire hazard, I mean, the runoff, the loss, I mean, all of these written down. I mean, I'm with you. I don't want to take any more farm ground away, but for me, I think there's too many negatives from too many different people.
so I saw your concern. So we're saying the positive is that we're not gonna take any more tillable away by approving the variance. That's what we're getting at. But there's some negatives here that we're gonna work through, so, that were presented tonight.
I guess, Andy, my thought on it, these things are never easy, but here we are looking at possibly approving a variance for a lot size that is under where it needs to be. And the first thing that sticks out in my mind was the septic issues. I think we have enough of those in the county, and we don't want to create more. Now, I'm not sitting here saying that the answer that this is, I think we need to know more. I'm curious, we talk about the idea of, is there an alternate site plan for the septic should it fail?
A set aside.
Huh?
They
Yeah,
call it a
set
set aside,
Set aside.
an area that's required to be preserved and not disturbed in case of a future system failure.
And so, I'm not sure we have that. So, and looking at the fact that I think it's gonna be highly unlikely that we'll ever see sewer running out there, where does it leave them in that event? While there may be ways around it that are extremely costly, I don't know.
And I also think looking down the road, kind of like what Bert said, I mean, the financing options, devaluing the land, I mean, that's a concern for me as well. And then could it be septic issues? Could it mean lots of different issues? Because you don't want to make problems down the road. I mean, just for a quick fix or just a fix now,
Yeah.
and then 20 years from now, we're having even more issues. That's my opinion.
So, we don't want to harm anybody. There's no way we want to harm the confined feeding operation, and I think that's cared for by the rules that we have set up right now. We certainly don't want to see anybody have drainage that adversely affects the living area or other people's areas. And we don't want to see septic systems fail on other people's property as well as this one here. But I think we probably ought to ask. Liz, can you tell us something about the septic system? Are we to the point where it was brought up that one septic system might affect the other septic system?
So this is probably a health department question. I'm not going to claim to be an expert, nor do I have jurisdictional control. If that was something that the board as a group felt was key in what your decision is. One option might be to continue the hearing to the next meeting and have us request the health department to send representation over to our next meeting to speak directly on the issue relative to septic rule, the soils tests they've received, and what they go and visit a site and they look through that as part of the permitting. So I can't, but we could request that Nash and or Rodney come to the next board meeting if you felt like that was something that would be make or break in what your motion would be. That would certainly be an appropriate thing to say. We could quantify that at the next meeting, and we can put a request out to the health department to either give us some sort of detailed report or show up themselves to answer board questions.
Okay, great. And then the issue with drainage. Now, I think somebody's saying there was a lake in the back or a pond or something.
So normally,
that adversely would affect this property and maybe others people property.
yeah. So normally things go to drainage board before the subdivision stage, but understandably, given the testimony we've heard tonight,
Right.
I understand why the board is questioning it. So this would be something again where you could continue it and you could tell the applicant that they need to voluntarily take it to the county surveyor and get some more professional opinion from those who are trained in those matters in terms of what the flow of water is. The surveyor's office has a number of tools, and if they were to look at it and feel that they also were concerned, they might want to send it to drainage board before rendering. I mean, there's nothing that prohibits them from getting a drainage opinion sooner. They just can't file a subdivision without actually having been heard by drainage board. But if there's reason to believe that drainage could be a significant issue, there would certainly be merit in the BZA saying they're not willing to render a decision until we get an opinion on drainage from the surveyor's office, whatever that office feels is needed to render that. Some things they look at and they're comfortable with, other things they want to send for a full review. That's among your choices if you felt like that was make or break.
And then, can you help me a little bit with fire protection and separation?
So the 10-foot separation distance between primary and accessory structures is the primary requirement the fire departments have requested to allow them to get around the outside of an occupied structure because, frankly, because we're volunteer fire departments and, a lot of us live rurally, the goal of volunteer fire departments is not actually to save the structure, and they rarely do. It's to get the people out and prevent loss of life. So their major concern is that they can get ladders and trucks around the four sides of the home as much as possible to get into windows and save lives. In terms of actually preventing the structure from burning something else, I mean, we've seen fires in areas in our community I think we can all think of where, buildings are connected and it runs across between them. I can also think of a significant fire in Frankfurt relatively recently with less than 20 foot between buildings where there was no damage to anything around the house. We see both things, 50 foot apart in a rural area. If you look at Manson or Forest or any of our R1, areas that don't have 20 acres per house, that would be a huge distance between houses for what we see in our current housing stock. So I think that's one where you could ask Frankfurt's fire marshal to come render an opinion. Whether or not he would be willing to, I don't know. But looking at what a lot of the housing stock is, I know in our communications on ordinances and regulation, 10 foot is the point at which the fire department starts to become super concerned. It's also the point at which building code, if you get, it's actually within 5 foot, I think, but if you get within 5 foot of a property line, building code starts to require you to add firewalls to the impinging structure to increase the burn time before an occupant would have a fire in their space. So the regulatory numbers at the state level and local level and fire codes tend to center around 10 and 3 foot for different things. And then if you have attached garages to your house, then you have to have firewalls because, you actually become your own greatest risk by parking your cars inside. So there's stuff like that, but there's no 50-foot number or 30-foot number or 120-foot number. Right. Now, of course, being aware on the other side of that, how the insurance industry reviews risk is different than the regulatory side. For example, my home, before I lost it to the tornado, had a metal roof. So I actually received an insurance discount because of the hail and wind ratings, which ironically is what kept part of my house standing and put me in the awkward situation I am with insurance now, but they have, they change rates based on that. They change rates based on what's the water flow available, and is it from a well, or is there a hydrant near your house? Like, there's a number of things, and whether or not that would affect an insurance rate, that's not something I could speak to, but I know insurance, they look at all kinds of things in risk, and what they view as your risk of taking a loss will affect your rate in areas of everything from floodplains to fire hydrants to the type of siding and roofing to, you know, whatever else they view as increasing their cost if you take a loss.
Okay, great.
Can I speak on that? Or is it too late to speak?
That's a board president question for Andy.
Let's just keep going. I think we've got enough, I mean, discussion here. You know, when we look at this, Chester, are you kind of done with your concerns?
So there's some things that, again, you don't want to create evil for anyone. Some, I believe, are something we need to pay attention to. Some, I think we could probably dismiss with little effect on our conscience, whether we're hurting anybody or not. I think the confined feeding is going to be protected. I believe that there's lots of houses that have less than 50 feet that are okay from the standpoint of fire protection. The thought about the pond and the drainage, I'm not 100% sure I understand that. And I think that we could send them away if we wanted to get that cared for with the drainage board. And the thing that I'd probably like to hear, I think that Liz recommended, is we invite somebody to talk to us about the septic. That would be, if I would be solving this problem, that would be the way I'd be going. I'd be going for a continuation for the septic, send it to the drainage board, and I think the rest of the stuff is kind of cared for. Those are the two biggest things, I think, in order to protect them and listen to their concerns, but yet be fair with the property owner. I think that's what we need to do.
I think that's right. I think, you know, we do need to, I don't think we can solve this tonight.
No, I don't either.
With the information that we've got today.
Well, and something that you also ought to think about is, if you're gonna have a continuance, is there a possible second septic site? Because the problem you have.
Staff has that concern.
Yeah, is you're looking at a structure, they're gonna make a substantial investment. Will it outlast the septic? Because you can't put a septic back on top of an old septic.
And on the county commissioner's side, we have had homes, the health department has had to declare unfit because of a septic failure, and then ultimately have been declared as unsafe structures. And then the commissioners are put in the position of having to tear down, which is, I guess I would say, I strongly support the unsafe building ordinances, and even though they don't make us any money as a community, the positive effect on other affected landowners is tremendous. But I also think, I hate being, and I know Kat doesn't like being the deliverer of bad news to a property owner, to be like, and I'm sure the health department doesn't, to be like, I'm sorry, you have to move out of your house because your septic has failed and there's nowhere to replace a septic with. So we're up a creek without a paddle and no options. So that's why the set aside is of some concern, because it is an older system. And, you know, the health department even said the same thing. They said it's functioning now, we can approve it, but, you know.
It all sounds great, and I think the only way we can handle this is to get more data and address those concerns. And they're all valid concerns. I mean, we're glad that people came and expressed their thoughts, and we want to hear them and address them.
I agree.
Yeah.
So,
would you like me to make a motion?
Well, I got one more question.
Okay.
So I think, you know, before you make your motion, we need to ask the landowner to talk to the surveyor.
Yep.
Now, on the health department, is that staff, or should we pin that on him too?
I think that probably needs to come from us, because
Okay.
my guess is
That
just
was my
interdepartmentally, if a
Okay.
resident is like, hey, please attend, like, they don't have the staff time to just attend everything. But we do have a standing agreement between departments that most of the time, if it's possible, if one of us needs another one, we try to serve each other and make sure that information is available. So, you know, I think that would be most appropriate to come as a request from staff on behalf of the board, that they're requested to either listen to our meetings minutes and give some detailed report for us to bring back, or send representatives so that you can better understand. And we'll also make them aware that there's a property line question, and just make sure, so they're not blindsided about those questions that are going to be asked, and they can double check their information.
Yeah, good. Well, that's what I would.
They won't be able to do anything on an alternative site without soil tests, would they?
That's correct. They'll have to have
they
soil
have to
tests
have
on an alternative
soil
site,
tests on
which,
the site.
I mean, you automatically will continue to your next meeting. What, if that's the motion you end up making, what I'll then ask is that everybody here that wants to follow this case makes sure that we have phone numbers, because at the next meeting, then if what's needed isn't ready, the board will then just choose to continue it again, and we can do the courtesy of calling people if it's not going to be heard, so that if you don't want to, but if we don't have phone numbers, we want to make sure anybody that wants to follow this is able to stay engaged and doesn't accidentally miss something. So there is a chance that they may not be able to get what you need. Also, if the surveyor wants it to go to drainage board, there's information that has to be given. There's filing deadlines. Those meetings are certain days. So, if the surveyor feels that this needs to be looked at, as a group, they may not be able to have it all sorted in 30. But you can make a motion to continue again. You just, our concern as staff is to make sure that we don't somehow lose an interested party who should be present or wishes to be present.
So how do we make this motion so that it would address the surveyor, the drainage board, and?
Well, I would say that we continue this case, and I'll make the motion.
Okay.
Continue this case, asking staff to contact the health department on having a in-case site or set-aside site for a septic on this property.
And I think
also-
that would,
The set-aside request needs to come from the petitioner, because they're gonna have to work with the health department to submit soil tests and decide where may be appropriate. I'm gonna go out on a
We need to
limb and
invite
guess it's
them.
gonna have to be the front yard.
Is that
But
what
we
you're
need to
looking
invite them to come to your next meeting.
Yeah.
That's the part we
Yeah.
need to do.
Yeah.
So two separate things. We can make the health department aware that the set-aside is in play, but the applicant will need to provide information to the health department for them to be able to determine if something is acceptable or not.
Well, and I mean, talking to the petitioner, I think everybody on this board, if this were to be approved, we would want a set-aside place for a second septic system in case this fails. I just think that, as far as I'm concerned and what our concerns are, I think that we need to, if that gets done, yeah.
Liz and Jay, what's the implications if we deny versus continue?
If you deny, then they can accept the denial, they can appeal it, or they can wait. And if either the material circumstances of the case change, they could bring it back to the BZA sooner. If they do not change, I'd have to check if it's 6 months or 1 year, but there's
I think it's
6
1 year.
months. Oh, you think 1 year? I'll look. There's a waiting period, like a cooling off period, that if the board denies a case and an applicant wishes to bring it back and it's the same, then they have to wait a certain amount of time before they can re-request. Now, if the material facts change, then that's different. Like,
if they come in with a materially different, in other words, if you
let's say they
denied this-
acquired more land and then they came back with just two of
Yeah.
the three like that would be materially different, or, but if it's the exact same request, then there's a
Or they
period.
came back and had evidence of a second septic field.
There you go.
That
would be-
previously wasn't
and-
there.
And they, yeah.
Yeah, so there has to be something different that would cause, the conversation to be different. They can't just come back the next month and go, same request, same facts, and everybody else comes in and goes, same objections, and you sit here and you go, well, that was unproductive, and that's just basically, it's a rule designed to not waste everyone's time. To say, hey,
And
address the issues or accept the ruling, but don't just keep coming back and knocking on the door with the same facts.
I just wonder if we decided as a board to deny, would that push the situation a little faster to resolve it, right? Versus continuing and maybe not, I don't know. I mean, just a thought.
Well, if we could get the information, I mean, obviously we want to know the health department situation and would like a little bit of information from the county surveyor on what they believe. I mean, if we can get that in a month, I think that that's fair for everybody. And, I mean, if we deny it, now we're a year.
It's
Right.
6 months or a year. I'm scanning
Well,
right now,
unless there's a
looking for
material
it.
difference, right?
Yeah.
There being the septic.
Yeah, I'm in the rules of
Yes.
procedure.
I mean, if we denied it and they came back, they could file and it wouldn't be on until October's meeting. You see what I'm saying?
Yep, yep.
So,
Yep.
if there was material difference, I say I would like to see us continue.
I'd do that. Get
And
more answers.
to inquire about the septic from the health department. And I would like to see if we can get a second site on that site in case it fails. And then, if you could inquire with the surveyor's office on the lot.
I had talked to Nash when he came out.
It's actually 90 days for them. Mostly the plan commission is 6 months.
He told me the same thing you said, if it ever fail, he said you'll have to put it back here and run along the lengths of it and use a different, like, chamber system or something to get the square footage. But he said there was room on there for that.
I'll second.
So we were all wrong down here. I think it's APC that has the longer date. This is a 90-day rest
Yeah,
period
so
for
3.
BZA. That said, like, obviously, if you deny it, Howell has to be renoticed to everybody, whereas if you continue, the notice holds the process. And my general overall encouragement on anything with a board is, if the things that you're struggling with would cause you each as individuals to change your vote one way or the other, then a continuance makes sense, because you're gathering information to make a choice. If, on the other hand, you already know how you would vote and why, and additional information isn't going to change your vote, then you might as well just let everybody in the room have resolution and make your motion, assuming that believe you have appropriate findings. So, and that's just general advice, not specific to this, but a continuance should have a point. There should be, not just with this board, but with any board that I'm helping, I feel like if you continue, out of respect for the people that come, there should be a reason you're continuing, something that makes a difference, information that you need, not just to kick a can,
Sure.
To address what Norm just had to say about Nash and meeting with Nash and the extra 2 fingers for his septic, I might want to point out that I talked to Nash also after Norm. And the conversation that Nash told me was Norm is in the process of acquiring an additional 1/4 acre to the north.
That was never.
That's what Nash told me.
That was never.
Okay, we got to address the board, not each other.
That's all I'm saying.
So, and I think if the health department comes, they can speak for themselves in terms of what they did or didn't say, or why they made whatever ruling, or what they saw when they visited the site.
Okay.
So
Let's, okay, if anybody, I've got my motion, let's just say it hasn't been seconded.
I think it has.
I did not write down your motion because we were
Okay.
looking up your days for.
Okay, so I will submit this motion unless somebody else wants to create a motion to move forward tonight.
Go ahead, you're on a roll.
Okay, so I move to continue, this, case. We know the number because this is the last one. And with needing more information from the health department, and would like either a representative here at our meeting or a document that shows, that we're good to go.
And the drainage.
And we would like to hear from the surveyor. So Norm, you would have to go to the surveyor's office and kind of show them the site and what you want to do and see if there's any drainage issues there.
Are you also asking for a
Set aside area?
set aside area?
And I would like to have information on the set aside area.
I'll second all that.
Was that Grant?
Yes.
Okay. So that computer monitor,
You're good.
Can we have, since this motion is second, can we
And
have
drainage.
a little bit more discussion?
Just
that's up to board. He hasn't called for a roll call vote yet.
go ahead.
Okay, so if we're looking for a set-aside area, I think Liz said that there needed to be some testing done too, right?
So I'm sorry, somewhat done?
If we're looking for a set-aside area for another drainage field, there'd
Yeah, they'll have
need
to
to
do
be some
tests.
testing done.
So the health department, that's actually their regulations. You can't decide whether or not something is suitable for a septic without doing soil borings.
Okay.
Those soil borings determine everything from how much capacity the ground has to absorb anything, in this case sewage, and what the water levels are all the way on out to, is it compacted, is it, so the health department will take care of they're not gonna say something suitable for a septic unless they have that, but they'll take care of that.
I understand, so.
But they will
does-
need information to
Right.
to do that.
So does the owner of the lot need to request them to do that ahead of
Well,
time?
they-
Or
No, they get a
they'll
soil
just do it?
test.
They'll just do it?
No.
No.
Okay,
The health department doesn't do the soil test.
Okay.
They review the soil test. The landowner has to do the soil test.
So when the health department finds out that the BZA is saying we need a set aside, then the health department's gonna most likely say, hey, we need a site plan, we need soil tests.
Okay.
And then he's gonna have to go get that stuff
Okay.
and bring it back to the health department, and they're gonna review it and render an opinion on whether or not that area is suitable for a set aside. And sometimes on lots that are tight, I've seen owners have to do 2 or 3 rounds of soil tests to actually find a suitable set aside. Sometimes your first guess isn't your right spot, so.
so I really wanted to ask the landowner to recognize that he might need to do some soil testing, and the faster he can get that going, the faster we can address the situation fully. So, okay. I'm
I
ready.
think if we're gonna continue, that's good.
Yeah.
But let's not, I think when we rehear, then there needs to be an adequate plan in place.
Yeah.
So that we are not
Right.
debating this further.
Staff is not gonna recommend to bring it back unless we have all 3 items that you've requested.
Good.
Your board rules allow you to continue something twice, so through 2 meetings without anything beyond that. If you hit the 3rd meeting, then you have to waive your board rules, which requires a unanimous vote in order to continue continuing. But generally, historically, we've only done that if if the applicant was like, okay, I've got 2 out of 3, and the drainage board meeting I'm docketed for is the Wednesday after our meeting, so we're definitely gonna have it. That like usually when the board has continued that many times, it's because you actually concretely know an answer is coming back to you. But yeah, I suppose at some point, if the information doesn't come and it's silent, the board can always choose to come back up and just go, we don't have what we need.
Right.
But we would want to notice all interested parties by phone if that, we wanna make sure that people know what the anticipated action is, so if they feel they want to follow it, they have the opportunity to be in the room.
Great, okay.
Cool. Roll call vote.
All right, this is a motion to continue with the, let me say, request that in order for the board to make a decision on this, you would like staff to have the health department either submit a written report or come in person to the next meeting to address what's been permitted and what the status of the existing system is and its location, the things that we discussed. 2, that a set-aside area be located, and the applicant needs to take care of the contacting the health department on that. And 3, that the surveyor's office give an opinion on drainage, whether it be from the office or whether it be because they feel it needs to go to drainage board, but they submit an opinion. When those 3 things are lined up, then it can come back to the board.
Yes.
So, all right. So my second was Grant, Andy Bailey,
Yes.
Grant Mueller,
Yes.
Scott Hensensberger,
Yes.
and Chester Bankus.
Yes.
Okay, so that's 4-0 to continue. Those of you in the room that want to follow this case, if you could please make sure, I think it's maybe on the roll call sheet, but just make sure.
Most everybody's got their number on it, and
Awesome.
the
And do you
people
know who's who for who's in the room? Okay, all right.
well,
I just want to make sure we don't miss anybody, that's all. So,
everybody that spoke would be
who to notice?
pretty much in the room. So, yep.
Yeah, we do. I pulled those out of the file.
Okay.
Yep, thank you. So, and by all means, if any of you have a question or you're just afraid maybe we forgot to call you, we are, just to be clear, we are not at all bothered if anyone calls our office and goes, hey, is this going to be discussed or is it not? The BZA meets the 4th Tuesday of every month, so if this comes back up, the first opportunity would be next month on the 4th Tuesday. So just to make sure you guys don't feel like you're pestering us, if you need to call and just be like, hey, do we need to be there? We're not going to take any offense.
So-
That's our job. And
so
we'll
we-
call if we don't expect it to be addressed. We'll call and let you know you don't need to come. If you don't hear from us, show up, because that means it's just going to follow what the board said tonight.
Hey, we don't have any new business or.
We do not.
Okay. Next meeting is September 24th, 2024. Look for
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
second.
Second.
We're adjourned.
Who was my second?
Andy.
Now me.
Okay. Not that I'm going to object, but.
I need to get Jordan and